What up, what up, what up? You're now tuned in to the world's most interesting podcast. I think so anyway. If we were on Yelp, I'd give it 5 out of 5 stars, would recommend. Tell a friend, like, share, subscribe, all of that and more. The Floor is Yours podcast. Let's get right into it right after this intro. This is when he's supposed to be ready.
New podcast, who want the smoke? Coming raw and uncut like who want this dope? Whatever you want, they for sure to cover the topic. From racial issues to fashion flies to cockpit. Y'all ain't never get it like this, cause they ain't never did it like this. We on our this the way the cookie crumbles for y'all. She gon' bring the inspiration to all. You know what's up with her. And this shit manifesting is the vision. And y'all gon' love TJ cause he the realest. From the heart of them all, they the start of it all. You looking for a high learning, holla at Georg. The professor, nothing lesson, coming at you with the lessons. Get your edge if you knowin' what's good for you. They educated, but they still keep it hood for you. Won't need another, this one here really do it for you.
Baby, the floor is yours. Yeah, baby, I'm in love with you. If it come down to the floor is yours. Let me show you how prove the floor is yours. The floor is yours. The floor is yours. The floor is yours. The floor is yours.
All right. Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Floor is Yours podcast. Wash, rinse, repeat. Racism, excessive force, murder, black outrage, media spin. And then the cycle happens over and over and over. Wash, rinse, repeat. No real justice. Then we've seen this play out time and time again. I'm James D. Some familiar faces from the crew may be popping in, but right now we also have some friends of the show this go around. Flex, go ahead and introduce the audience to our special guest tonight.
Oh yeah, actually, I'm just going to pass the mic to them and let them do the set. If you follow us for a number of months, you're familiar with these two. Ivo, we'll start with you. Let you introduce yourself to the ones that don't know you.
Hello, my name is Ivo Jackson. Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Ivo Jackson. I am a native Detroiter living in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I'm a marketing consultant and a cannabis advocate.
Right on. I love it. Love it. Mr. Leroy.
Yes, I'm Leroy Dodd. I am a community activist, also a founder of a firm called Ethos Empire. And what I do is I help companies tap into the essence of why they're in business to connect with their customers and clients. And so here in Houston, doing things to try to curb, what's happening in our community and Black and minority communities to have a consistent experience in this American experience. So glad to be here.
Oh yeah. So just to let y'all know, we'll have a time at the end of the show to let y'all both throw in a little more plug about what you do, the cannabis activist, and same for you, Leroy, what you're doing there in Houston. So, James.
Oh, no problem. All right, appreciate you guys being on the show with us today. Now, remember, we welcome all perspectives on the Floor is Yours podcast. No matter if most people agree or disagree, we welcome everybody's opinion. This is a safe space. Again, everyone's entitled to their opinion. Just remember, people are also entitled to their opinion about your opinion. Without further ado, unfortunately, this has been going on for far, far too long. And unfortunately, it's still a hot, relevant topic. So let's get right into everything that, we've been talking about, everything that's going on right now. Let's start with the Derek Chauvin trial. He was charged with second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter in the killing of George Floyd. Today, the defense, what's the proper term? They rested their case today. Is that the way to say it? And they'll begin closing arguments on Monday. So what are your thoughts on the case? How do you feel about the charges? What's a fair verdict, and what do you think the verdict will be? Viewers, make sure that you're commenting on the different platforms, and we'll make sure we get to your comments. Ivo, we'll start with you. What do you think?
The fact that there's a trial for a murder that everyone watched on video, where the defense is actually arguing anything other than temporary insanity, is insanity in and of itself. But everything about this country and the race relations in it are crazy. They've always been crazy. I don't expect real justice to be served, because real justice is not served in this country. That's not a thing here. Today and yesterday, I, watched as much as I could, and they're basically setting it up so that he can get the lightest sentence possible. It would be entirely impossible to completely get him off. So they're maneuvering to see how light a sentence they can get for this Black man's life. It's traumatic. I'm not dealing with it well.
Yeah.
And I'm tired. I'm very, very tired. Not tired in a way that leads to complacency, but tired in a way where I am ready for change.
Yeah.
What's the change you're looking for?
Hey, let me add something. Speak on something you just talked about real quick. So in my mind, I'm just going with what's normal. Something happens, we give people their just due in the form of a trial. But I never considered what you just said. Like, why are we even having a trial on something that should be so obvious? Other than what you said, was he insane or something? So, man, I never even considered. I don't know if any of you want to add to that.
Well,
right? That is.
Let me say this. I don't believe in the insanity plea for a defense. Let's go here. Anyone that kills someone for no reason or that's not self-defense, they're insane. They're crazy. That's not up for debate. Anyone who goes and kills 9 people in a church, goes and shoots up a movie theater, they are not mentally competent. Something is wrong with them. So now that we got that out the way, let's get to the shits. Let's get to the real thing. So being able to plead insanity of defense to get off or get a lesser sentence, that's ridiculous to me in the first place. Georg, what you think about it?
Well, I think all of this is just political theater. I mean, we've all kind of been watching this happen over and over again. And so all of this has just kind of been turned into a show. When you look at it, I think there's a lot of legal maneuvering happening here. We have this thing called due process. And, that's supposed to be an American thing that every American is entitled to. I know many African Americans and minorities in this country have not been afforded the same luxury of due process as we can, that's the reason we're having this conversation. However, I think that in addition to that, I feel like that, when you're dealing with cases like this, I think the goal is to make sure that everyone has a consistent experience when dealing with the legal system. And that's the only way that we can get to justice is if everyone has the same experience. And I think that's what we should be advocating for. We don't want to jump past the preliminary things. We want everyone to have the same process when in dealing with the legal system. And I think that's what we should expect.
Right. I totally agree with you. Everyone is entitled to a trial, no matter how obvious it looks or whatever the case may be. I don't ever want to be one of the people that are making emotional decisions as opposed to fair and just. Mm-hmm. Now, while we're talking about this audience, I'm curious. I want to know, like I said earlier, we welcome all opinions, whether we agree or disagree. So anyone that feels that Derek Chauvin isn't guilty or he didn't act out of order, whatever the case may be, I want to hear your thoughts. I want you to let us know in the comments and also tell us why. And we'll definitely put it on the show and address it. But getting back to the trial, Ivo, you were making a point earlier, and I don't know if anyone cut you off. Was there anything else that you wanted to add to what you were saying earlier?
No. Thank you.
Hey, let's let Leroy answer this question right here, because this response here was kind of to his response. But he said, this is from Teresa Graham. She said, but we don't have the same experience and process and never have. You want to address that right there?
Yeah, I agree with the comment. We have not, but at the same time, we're not advocating for a favor or to be tilted in one way or the other. I understand that our experience in dealing with the justice system is not the same as white Americans. And that's what we should be having a conversation surrounding. But we also have to keep in mind that this trial and our interaction with the legal system, it doesn't start right there. When the footage started rolling, this case is being held surrounding a number of facts that is not even being discussed. And that all occurred before the officer and these individuals even came into one another's presence. And that is the perspective and the mindset that officers or law enforcement are going into these interactions with. And as well as a lot of Black American men and women, the mindset that we have going into an interaction with law enforcement, these two things are really what should be on trial here. Because until we can address those things, we'll continue to have these trials. We'll continue to have these riots. We'll continue to have protests. We'll continue to have police brutality. When a police officer goes into the community that they're called to serve and protect, but a number of those individuals in that community are already suspects, they're already perceived dangerous, they already perceive a threat, even before there's any crime committed, whether there's a crime committed or not. And so whenever there's a movement or motion or interaction, they're going to automatically interpret that as aggressive. And they're going to respond according to that level of aggression that has already been pre-programmed in their mindsets. And then on the other hand, those who are being called suspects, we're already set with a level of fear that has been passed on from generation to generation, ingrained into our mindset. And so when you are interacting with an officer or police enforcement, that fear drives a lot of emotions and causes us to do things that may be misinterpreted or may be interpreted in a way that is a hostile way. These are the things that I really feel like we should be discussing. How can we resolve those things? Because until we resolve those things, we'll continue to have these type of, unwarranted deaths.
That's actually a good point, and that actually leads into my next question. And I want everyone to, and also the floor is yours, audience. I want your opinions. Put them in the comments. But this is what I want to know. What would be your solution to bring about change? I mean, like if it were that easy, we'd be doing it, right? So I want everyone to get a chance to speak, but I want everyone to give their thoughts on what would be a solution to have equal justice in this country. How do we go about that? Felix, let's start with you. What do you think?
Oh man, it's some of what Leroy just said. Man, we got to change the mindset. A lot of this is woven into the fabric. You got, we talk about 400 years of since the first slave ship hit the coast, and since then, years of slavery, civil war, Jim Crow, civil rights movements, all these things. And I remember reading a number of years ago a statement that said that just because they allowed us to drink out of the same water fountain, that all of a sudden that the years of trouble just went away. And we know that's not it. And I've learned, in the end of my military career, I was in an equal opportunity program, and what I learned is that it's a difficult discussion. It's a difficult topic. It's very challenging to have, and you throw in the not just the difficultness of it, but the fear. Some people reject the idea that they have these biases. A lot of them are conscious, unconscious biases. I call them conscious biases sometimes, that they play the system to their favor. But man, it's tough. I know up until about 4 or 5 months ago, I was big on like let me in, let me play, with you and just level the playing field and allow me in your arena. And I'm not there anymore. Now I'm like, if I don't, not so much a separatist, but I believe in going into our communities and building up our communities and playing where we have an
Yeah.
opportunity to be safe, to be prosperous. We hear about Black Wall Street back up in Tulsa, and I mean that's not the only community of Black that's thriving, but they're few and far between. But I believe like the government has a responsibility for what they've done over the years. And whether that comes out, people don't like the word reparations, but Joe Biden is pushing the infrastructure bill. I think a lot of that money needs to go in our communities, help rebuild our infrastructure so that we can go in and do business amongst our own people. That's where I think the plan needs to start.
Okay, Ivo, what's your solution?
There is no solution. I am a political realist leaning toward patriotic nihilism, if that were a thing. We've been in this country for hundreds of years, and we got here because they were buying and selling people. And hundreds of years later, we're still being killed. We're still being policed. We still have this same struggle, and we're in a cultural Cold War, like in perpetuity. There's no solution to that. I believe that Black Americans need to get more in touch with our political and economic realities versus the ideals that we've been striving for, because the concept of striving for an ideal society in the United States of America, I'm just ready to give up on the whole idea. Like, we've been at this a long time now. These people are not changing. They don't want to share power. They're not trying to give it up. If Black people get too free, they decide they can, correct that. And it's not everyone,
Right.
but it was never everyone. This is a continual dynamic. I'm led to believe at this point it's a constant in the United States. And I believe that Black Americans would do well to start treating certain things like constants and then responding accordingly. That doesn't mean we can't participate in the political system. I just think we need to participate in a different way. I'm looking for a post-partisan experience where Black people don't have any loyalties to political parties or any loyalties to anybody that doesn't have an agenda that's about the empowerment of Black people. Because for what? Nothing else works. I think we should be arming ourselves with knowledge, with guns, with nutrition, with self-defense, because anything can pop off in this place. We are at war. Mm-hmm. It may be a cold war, may be kind of quiet in some places, but it's hot in Minnesota.
It's getting loud.
And it's getting loud. So I just think we need to move with a more realist approach instead of the idealist approach that we've traditionally taken in our social theory, because it's not working out.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, Leroy, did you want to add on to anything? You have a solution?
Well, I don't believe that it can be unraveled. What has been done cannot be undone. So number one, we have to come to grips with that. Number two, in order to address it, we have to address it on multiple fronts. It's not about just one specific area. It's not about policing. It's not about law enforcement alone. It has to be education, because number one, the two mindsets that are at the forefront of the struggle that we continue to see happening again and again, a lot of it is only to be addressed by education. So those who are ignorant, when they perceive a Black person or a minority as inferior or a threat, that needs to be corrected. That way of thinking, that understanding needs to be addressed. So education is the only way to address that type of mindset. And maybe that can only happen when you are more in touch with that particular community. And so I think that those who are policing, though, they have to be more in touch with the community that they're policing to understand their behaviors, to understand their cultural beliefs, their cultural things that they elevate within their own community, which may be very different from those who are policing. Then number two, those who are living in this fear, we have to figure out a way how to control those fears in intense moments, with the knowledge that the other individual who may be holding a weapon, who is legally and rightfully able to kill you. I think you have to control that situation with knowledge, understanding that, okay, let me make sure I have my fears in check and respond accordingly. I've had to do this. I've been held at gunpoint twice by police, SWAT, Texas Rangers, all of that. And I understood that the mindset of the people holding those weapons may not be in sync with my mindset. And I had to use that as power to take control of that situation to make sure I got out alive. Number three, I feel like we have to understand that our political affiliation, traditionally, we have aligned with one political party at a high rate over the years. I think that alignment has been taken for granted. Therefore, we're not having the same political backing that someone else that demonstrated that same level of loyalty with that political affiliation. And so there are a number of different things that we have to do. Another idea that I feel like is something feasible and that can be explored is not creating more laws against this, because laws don't prevent these things from happening. Number one, we've seen that more and more laws have been passed, and we continue to have this same thing happen over and over again. I feel like if we could find a way to locally start driving policies at the local level of how we can begin to police our own communities, how we can begin to deputize our own, peers within our community of members that we trust, and be empowered with, the resources to have our own policing. I think that this will allow us to eliminate a lot of the tension that happens following something like this. So there are a number of points that we have to move on in order to bring a solution to what we're advocating for today.
All right. I have a different perspective than the ones that I've heard so far. And I hope I don't ruffle feathers, but let me just start here. I do agree with some of the things that were said. For example, Ivo, you made a comment earlier about, Black people having political loyalty, not having political loyalty. I'm sorry. I totally agree with that. I've said it before. We need to stop waiting on a white savior. Like we have to stop waiting on white people to save us. And I'm sorry, but all the education, all the talking and understanding, and all the votes, that's still not going to change everything, because evil people are going to do evil things. So we can't focus on this narrative like we're going to stop this and live in this utopic world. It's just not going to happen. What we need to really focus on is equal and fair sentencing. So we have to remember that Tupac said it best. Tupac once said that fear is more powerful than love. And a lot of people would want you to believe the opposite, but it's just not true. If you go back in history, every major historical event that brought about change in modern civilization was changed by two things: money and violence. The fear or the actual loss of people losing their money, or the fear or actual loss of life. Slavery, segregation, countries taking over other countries, America coming about, Spain taking over the American continent, everything happened through war and power and violence, money and violence. So I think that when we really understand that, we have to know that all the talking in the world isn't going to change everything. Unfortunately, the only thing that's going to change things is kind of what you said a little bit earlier, Ivo, when you said people need to arm up. If people were in fear, like if police officers were in fear of losing their lives every time they did something bad, you would see a change real quick. Think about it like this: if you survey 100 people and you ask them, would you rob a bank? The majority of those people would say no way. Would they say no because they're good people? Not necessarily. Most of them are going to say no because of the fear of the consequences that come with it. If you ask the same 100 people, would you rob a bank, knowing 100% they're going to get away scot-free and you're not going to get hurt, that number of people that said no at first would dramatically reduce. So people aren't doing it necessarily because it's the right thing. They're doing it because, of the consequences. So I think that I would like to see a social experiment to bring about change. I call it the Blind Justice Initiative. In this initiative, I think that if there was a court set up where the jurors were not allowed to see the plaintiff or the defendant, and they weren't allowed to know anything about that person's race, and they were only able to make decisions based off the actual events that occurred, and race could not play a part on it, and they had no idea if the person were black or white, I promise you we would have drastically different outcomes with sentencing. And one last thing before we move on, black people, stop trying to get out of jury duty. Because as soon as we get these unfair sentencings or like the cases don't even go to trial because of a grand jury, everybody wants to get mad and in an uproar. But these are the same people that are always trying to get out of jury duty. So if you want to make a change, it starts there. But moving on, another big thing in the news right now is with, sorry, I lost my notes real quick. Let me pull it back up. I was talking too much and my screen closed down on me because sometimes I go off on a tangent. But let's move on. Let's talk about Daunte Wright. I mean, everybody's, how many of you, first of all, have the three of you seen the actual video footage?
I haven't.
Yes.
I don't even want to watch it, man.
I don't watch video footage like that anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm pretty sure that the majority of our audience is familiar with the situation. I can talk about it, or Flex, do you want to give a quick recap on it?
Yeah, go ahead and recap it if you don't mind, and then we'll jump into a discussion.
Sure, not a problem. Daunte Wright, a young 20-year-old male, was pulled over by police. The situation escalated. He tried to jump in the car and drive away, and he got shot. That's pretty much sums it up. The crazy thing about it is there's a situation that happened today where a white person tried to do the same thing. He's still alive. There's also another video, Flex, I saw it, but Flex sent it to me earlier. It was an older video of a guy who had a gun in a car, was threatening the police, refused to get out of the car, did not comply, put his hands on his gun, and ended up driving away. It was so ridiculous that you would think that it was fake. Yeah. So, but unfortunately, that wasn't the case for Daunte Wright. He was a father. He was someone's son, someone's nephew. His aunt got up and spoke today, and she spoke yesterday, and you could just hear the hurt, the pain, and you could feel the passion in her voice with some of the things she said. Floor is yours, audience. We want to know what you think about the case, and we'll start with you, Leroy.
I mean, again, I wouldn't approach this and try to compare it to other instances, although, there are a lot of similarities, but we have totally different people, totally different contexts, totally different situations. One thing that we do know that is common is it was a white officer and it was a black individual who lost their life. Now, we don't know about other videos and other instances where similar situations or circumstances were there, but the outcome was different. So I would be careful to try to compare them and draw a conclusion based off those comparisons. But in this isolated issue, once again, it was an unwarranted murder. A life was ended. He did not seem to have pose a threat to these officers. If you feared for your life, the first thing that we are programmed to react is fleeing. And so we don't know what he was doing. We can't speculate. We don't know. He's not here with us, and we'll never know what was going through his mind at that moment. But I'm sure in his mind, when he got stopped, there was a level of fear there that drove those actions, even though we know that a lot of time those who have had that same action in the past ended in a bad way. And so it's just difficult to say exactly what that outcome would have been or could have been. We know what it was, and we know it ended in the wrong way.
I have to disagree with you a little, Leroy. I mean, you seem like a cool guy, but I got to give you a little kickback. Like, unfortunately, we're talking about something that's based off procedures and protocol. So we can compare to other situations and other incidents. And not to mention that these incidents are happening in the same area. So, and if when cases go to trial, every case in court is argued based off past precedent. So we do have to compare things. Well, this person did this in the situation, and this person didn't do this. And so, I mean, like, I have to disagree with you on that. These are the things that we have to compare it to, because comparison is how we determine what's fair and what's not fair, right?
I would disagree. It's not based upon what's fair and what's not fair. It's based upon a set of laws and the parameters of those laws. Then the individuals are how they're interacting with those laws. Is there a violation? Did you follow the protocols? Did you follow the standards? I agree with you there. But as far as, me committing an act and how you respond to that act is two different individuals interacting with two different mindsets, two different backgrounds. And so I don't feel like we can compare these instances, although we continue to see the narrative be the same surrounding them. I feel like they're all different instances, though.
I got you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Let's be realistic, okay? We know that police officers deal with white suspects and black suspects differently across the board, routinely in general. Not every single officer, but Black Americans can expect to be treated differently by police and have that expectation be met a reasonable amount of the time. So since we know that, those of us who try to employ wisdom, we come up with these ideas of how we should act, what we should do, and we try to teach our young people or teach each other when you get into an altercation or if you have an encounter with the police, this is what you should do. And all of that instruction is good on the surface, but essentially the problems that we have with police that we can control, because we can't control racism, there's nothing we can fix. There's nothing we can do to make them not be whatever they are when we get pulled over. The only thing we can control is our emotional response. And culturally, we do not have enough control over our emotional response. It's not something you can teach in the moment. That's why these young men and women oftentimes do things and make moves that seem irrational, because in the moment they cannot process and handle their emotions in such a way where they can stay alive. But when you do not have a lot of structure in your life, when you don't have a lot of strong authority or understand that kind of infrastructure, and you don't have a lot of practice controlling your emotions for the sake of respecting authority or preserving your life or your safety, i.e., if you grew up in a house with a strong father, you knew when to fall back because you had to preserve your life and your safety. If you don't have that kind of structure and history, when you're in a high stress situation, there are no instructions that you can follow in the moment.
Right.
You're not prepared. Generally, I believe we should be training and preparing for the reality that we are dealing with, and then striving for the ideal that we want to see, but not waiting for it and hoping for it and putting our hopes in the political process. We just have to, at every time and every point in our history in this country, deal with the current reality. Because when we get idealistic, we start accepting the political theater. We start accepting the apologies and the convictions for show, where they spend less than 5 years in prison for murdering Black people in cold blood. We accept it because we don't expect to do anything different, because we're not training for anything different. We're not training for the reality that we are experiencing. I think we're just reacting emotionally. Even with our intellectual reactions, they still tend to be emotional. We have to prepare and get ahead of these things and start thinking ahead and not always looking behind.
Yeah, and I think that kind of ties the two thoughts here. When you have those legal protocols and standards in place, and when they're violated, if you can control the emotion in that circumstance and get through that, now you have the standing to bring legal repercussions for those who misbehave in those circumstances.
Yeah. Hey, so let me just say on to both of you points, all three you made the point, but even to this question, we talk about having the conversation with our children or the youth about how to conduct yourself if you ever are encountered by law enforcement. And I was thinking about a video I saw a couple weeks ago, and it was from a white lady, and she said that she never has had to have that conversation with her kids. So to Ivo's point, it's a real deal, and unfortunately, a lot of times it don't even come up until it's too late, or we're at the height of some just bad tension in the country. So to each of you, if you don't mind taking a moment and to address this question or this comment right here from Teresa. She says, I just want my grandsons to have the right to be able to drive to the store, and if it takes them a little too long, I don't panic thinking that they have been shot. So that's a real deal. Again, talking to the youth and even yourselves, understanding how you want to respond in case you're ever encountered by law enforcement. So I want to hear your thoughts on that. Ivo, you want to start that one?
Can you repeat the question exactly that you want me to answer? Are you asking for my thoughts about encounters with law enforcement?
Or having to have that conversation with your children. Have you did it? And how do you feel of having to have that conversation, knowing that white America don't have to have it?
Oh, well, I've had that conversation with my children perpetually for years. My oldest son just turned 16. So we talk about it, not all the time, but intermittently. It's not a let's sit down and have that conversation. It's something that we discuss because he's constantly going into environments where he needs to be reminded or guided. Now, you're going to be over here with these people. You have to understand that they're not you, and they may not receive you the way you're received at home and in your community. So you need to be on guard. And when you find yourself in encounters with police or white people who think they have authority over you, because, it doesn't require real authority. Sometimes They just show up in the whiteness like, well, I feel like you don't have a right to be here.
Yeah.
Whenever so we have to discuss what they expect from him in that moment and what he should do to preserve his life in that moment. But we also train our children to control their emotions every single day, because you're not going to find the control in the moment when you're seething with rage at how this person has the audacity to do whatever they're doing. Like, you got to be calm, cool, and collected just to be able to survive. And it's not because they deserve any song and dance from you. This is just real life. If you want to come home, you have to conduct yourself in a way where you do not emote at all in any way that's not pleasant or helpful. And it's not about being anything inauthentic. It's just about controlling everything and remaining in control. Because as soon as you get out of control, you give them something that they can respond to and then twist to mean whatever they want it to mean, because that's what life looks like in this country. So we kind of have always been having that conversation, and with my daughters too.
Yeah. Leroy?
Yeah, I mean, I have two boys. They're young. I have a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old. And what I do every day, as Ivo just said, this is something that we as parents have to constantly train our children how to be in control of you. You can't control anyone else, how they think, how they feel, how they react. You can only control you. And the moment that you get out of that space of self-control, you are now weak. You can be exploited. You can be defeated. And I teach my boys this every day. Just yesterday, I had my boys arguing over the game, what game we're going to play. We're on the Xbox. No, we're going to play this game. No, we're going to play that game. And their voice continued to escalate. No. And I went in and I interrupted and I said, wait a minute. Whatever game you want to play, you're not going to win this argument by trying to speak louder and use more words or even get violent. And I teach them how to create an argument to advance your ideology or your perspective of why you want to play this game. Well, maybe we can play this game for 30 minutes and then we can play your game. I try to teach my boys how to find resolution. And so don't allow yourself to get emotionally excited to where you're not thinking, how do I get to the solution? How do I walk away with what I really wanted? And this is a skill that can navigate you through America. This is a skill that can navigate you through your career. This is a skill that can navigate you through your marriage in the future. This is a skill that can help you parent your own children someday. And so if you can get a handle on this skill, even in a situation or interacting with law enforcement, you understand how to maintain self-control and always be looking for a solution. If we can train our children in this, we don't have to have mothers or fathers fearing if their children are going to come back to that. Can it still happen? Of course. We've seen that as well. But this minimizes the risk of your child being murdered and life ended without warrant.
Okay. Personally, it's frustrating to me, idealistically, to tell someone, that you have to be more controlled than the trained professional who's supposed to be trained in handling hostile situations. That's such a frustrating thing and a frustrating concept to try to teach a child, personally speaking. And that kind of goes with what Shay said. Shay said, they are the professionals. They need the training, not us. We cannot keep conforming to what they do. We always train for what they do. They need to train to deal with the public, the entire public, not just the public that looks like them and looks like them, and there has to be zero tolerance by their employer. I understand what you're saying, Shay. I agree to a certain extent, idealistically. But here's the thing. It's about survival. And my job, this is what I teach my son. My son is 9 years old, and we've already had that conversation before. I let my son watch American Skin. We had dialogue. We had conversation about it. I want him to understand what's going on. And the thing about it is, I teach my son that there's a difference between respecting someone and complying. My job as a black man, his job as a black man eventually is to make it home. That's it. When you're in this situation, you need to do whatever you got to do to make it home. And people can say that's wrong, that's messed up, whatever. And I agree with you, but I don't care what this person dealing with. My goal is to make it home. And when it comes down to it, like people say all the time, you can do everything. You can comply 100% and still get killed. And we all know that's true. But we saw a black man get shot laying on the ground with his hands up before, trying to help one of his clients who was mentally challenged. You guys remember that video? But it really doesn't matter with the circumstances. Like, we have to try our best to heighten our chances of surviving and making it home. And that's it. Like, when people be like, why we got to do this and why we got to do that? To live, to survive. That's why. And what I teach my son is this: let these people get off on their little power trip. And you can comply all day, but that doesn't mean that you respect that person. And so you don't even feel like you have to let that person know that you don't respect them. Just do what you got to do to get through the situation, because typically the most times the worst thing that they can do is give you a ticket. And my thing, and the other thing that I teach my son is, don't fight it then, fight it later. Do what you got to do to get out the situation and make it home. Because it's just like in a basketball game. If a referee calls a foul on you, you can go and argue with that referee all day. He's not going to change that foul call. If they go and review it later, then the NBA or whoever, they can come back and be like, well, a mistake was made on that play. And that's just how the courts work. If you feel like something was done wrong, we can go and fight it in court later. That's the place to try to fight it. But right then, at dark at night, that's not the place. So again, I understand what you guys are saying that are viewing, but I have to disagree with you guys. We do have to adapt. We have to adapt to survive. And we've been doing that for years. And I think that one of the most disrespectful comments that I ever heard someone say is, we are not our ancestors. That's disrespectful. That's so disrespectful to our ancestors, because under all the hardships and the anguish and the abuse that they put up with, 99% of us would have folded under that. So that's so disrespectful. So it actually took strength to endure and deal with what they did so that you can survive and be born and be here now. But let me get off my soapbox. That's
one thing I wanted to say, I know earlier you mentioned about fear. You talked about how fear is a strong driver, and I feel like the survival thing. I feel like that's something that we're teaching out of fear. I don't teach my boys to survive. I teach my boys how to thrive in life. And I think when you use that connotation of fear of surviving, you got to survive. You're constantly under a threat, under attack. And I think that's living a life in fear. I feel like if we can take a different approach to it by saying, here are some successful keys to help you be successful in many areas of your life, and live by these keys and apply them to your life, then you will be successful in many areas of life, even if it is interacting with an officer. And so I wouldn't use that term survive when having these type of conversations with my children, because I just don't feel like that has the right connotation. I don't want them to feel like they have to survive. I want them to feel like, you know what, these are the things I want to live by, because I know these are going to make me dominant in my society.
Leroy, I feel you, but it doesn't matter how educated you are, how eloquent you speak. It doesn't matter how well versed you are, how culturally diverse you are. It doesn't matter about all those things when you are in a situation where there is someone who doesn't know you, who doesn't like you, who has access to a gun, waiting for you to make the wrong move. I'm sorry, but in every circumstance, thriving is not the case to be. In some circumstances, it is about survival. If there's a racist cop with your educated boys that you have raised to the best of your ability, he doesn't care about that. So in that particular one instance, that one situation, they do need to survive. Now, when I teach my son, man, when you go to school, you just need to survive and make some C's. No, I want you to thrive and make A's. That's where I want you to thrive at. But when you're in a situation where you're facing someone who has a barrel of a gun pointed at you, you need to do what you need to do as best you can to survive that encounter, that situation, because your education, your culture, all that shit go out the window.
And I agree 100%, but I'm saying your approach to surviving doesn't need to be driven by fear. That's all I'm saying.
Fear is important. You can't have courage without fear.
Yeah. Hey, let's go to this next question. James, you want to introduce this one, and then we'll try to wrap it up after that.
Got you. Teresa said, but to me, it's a fundamental error that Black and brown kids have to even subscribe to this. I think that's pretty much what we were just talking about right now. But let me defer to our guests. How do you guys want to respond to this?
Black and brown kids have always had to subscribe to this, as long as Black and brown kids have been in this country. The difference is previous generations were taught culturally different ways, and I'm not saying they were successful or always good, but they were taught ways to cope emotionally and to contain themselves, because the threats to Black lives in times past were more real for everybody. Now in 2021, we don't all face the same kind of racial tension or oppression in different areas of the United States, at different socioeconomic brackets. We're having different experiences, so it's not as easy to recognize a common enemy. But in years past, it was very obvious. During slavery, Jim Crow, we had to have a culture of self-control because your life depended on it. Exactly. The reason why it's so outrageous to us now is because we're more free. And we haven't for a long time had to think the way my mother had to think. My mother happens to be 40 years older than me. She's turning 82 this month. She knows nothing but self-control. And she was a child once, and she had to deal with a harsher racial reality than we do. But they were actually taught to deal with it. we have to get back to training our people to deal with certain things emotionally and deal with it better, because now we have more access to information. We know more about mental health care. We know more about proper nutrition and brain supplementation. We can make better choices with how we cope and how we employ self-control, but we got to get back to teaching self-control.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I definitely agree with everything that you just said. Before we continue, to everyone that's watching on Facebook, watching on YouTube, please take the time to go and like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're on Facebook, type in youtube.com or Google YouTube, The Floor is Yours podcast. Just take that one extra second that it takes to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We would really appreciate it. We're trying to get those followers up. Let me ask you guys another question. Audience, I want you guys to chime in on this too. What's the mindset of people telling other people to go back to your country, or you need to get out of America, or basically harassing them because these privileged people think they can tell people if they can or cannot live in a certain part of town? And I think you guys know we're about to transition into next, but let me know what you guys think about that. Flex, what you got?
Oh man, I didn't know he was gonna start with me. I think it's that Ivo used this phrase a lot, the white superiority. I think it's that in its purest form, to tell you you don't belong in this neighborhood. They go into certain stores and, I'm not wearing a mask because it's my constitutional right, or, you don't belong in this country, even though these people are just as much as a citizen of America as they are. So, I mean, in the simplest form, it's that right there. It's what drives a lot of conflict. It's this mindset that they won't say, certain things, but they are insinuated with that right there. Like it's obvious. I mean, without rambling too much about it, I think that's it. It's the superiority complex that they have.
Okay, Ivo, what you got?
Just to expound a little bit on what he already said, authority is inherent to the concept of whiteness, which is where white supremacy comes from. Race ideology itself puts white people at the top and in authority. And historically, in Western societies, white people have been in authority and had a monopoly on all authority. That wasn't just legislative, that wasn't just economic, it's social and it's cultural, and that attitude continues to be passed down. So even though society looks different now, as far as non-white people being in positions of authority, whiteness has authority inherently woven into it. Like white people just, and ownership. They believe they own everything and everybody. Those who subscribe to whiteness and blackness, because they have ideas about what black is and what black people can and can't do, just like they have ideas about what white is and what white people can and can't do, because that ideology itself, by itself, has the social hierarchy baked into it. And so they just think they're at the top. And if something is out of order, according to them, they have the right to set it back in order, because their ownership and their authority is inherent and implied because they are white.
Okay. Well, before I get to you, Leroy, let me go back to the comments. Tip Lynette says, learn their laws. That's how they are suppressing us. I can understand you a little bit on that. The Black Panthers, they were very educated. They knew the laws. Bobby Seale, Huey P. Newton. But guess what? When they started using laws to their advantage, guess what they did? They changed the law. So we still have to continue to adapt. Leroy, what do you got?
Well, I mean, I got to use the word on this one. As a man thinketh, so is he. We become what we consume. And I feel like just like there's a level of fear ingrained into the psychological disposition of a lot of Black and minority people in this country, there's also on the other side of that coin this disposition among white Americans, as for so long they've consumed and been showed that you are superior, others are inferior. And that's what they've always seen. When you look at CEOs and presidents of top companies, political individuals who have a lot of political power, they see white individuals, people who look like them in these different places in society that control society and manipulate society. And so over years, it has created this psychological disposition that I am inferior, I am better. And so these things have to be unraveled over years, and it also has to be unraveled through educating or exposing us to something opposite of what we've been ingrained with for over the history of this nation. And so, I mean, it's something that is ingrained automatically. They do not have to be taught this because they're consuming it through what they watch, through what they see, what they hear. It's in everything that they consume. And so therefore it is embedded within their mindset. Just like a lot of times what we watch, what we consume, and the music that we listen to and create, it has certain things that automatically ingrain in our subconscious. And when we find ourselves in the reality of those situations, naturally that wants to come out. And so we have to address both the inferior mentality as well as that superior mentality as well.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Now, the reason that I brought this up is, let's say you guys decide, one of you guys decide to take a stroll through your own neighborhood one day.
Mm-hmm.
You're walking down the street, and out of nowhere, people start coming up to you, harassing you, talking to you crazy, yelling. One person got a camera in your face, and one person is physically assaulting you, pushing you, telling you, what are you doing here? You don't belong here. Why are you in this neighborhood? And remember, you live there. The person just happens to not know you. We're talking about the situation with the racist Jonathan Pentland. We know pretty much what's happened so far. It escalated to the point where he got charged with assault, and now he's under investigation. Also with, even the military is investigating the situation and looking into it more thoroughly. And we know that when he was assaulting the young man, the next day, hundreds of protesters showed up at his house, come kick us off the line. So, what I want to deal with specifically is, how do you guys feel about and that's the reason that I asked the question earlier, how do you feel about this mentality that someone has the right to tell somebody that they don't belong here, and to be able to question someone as to why they're somewhere in a public space when they have no legal authority to do so? This white privilege in neighborhoods. How do you guys feel about that? Leroy,
I feel like we need to adapt to our reality because these people are crazy. They think they can police you because they're white and they don't approve of what you're doing. There's no blanket answer for what to do in a moment like that, because everything is relative to where you are, what you're doing, if you strapped or not, are you by yourself? There's so much going on and so much that goes into that general awareness and a real sobering concept of the reality you live in just will cause us to be always prepared. Like we can't move the way the Black Panther Party used to move. We're in a different place, we're in a different day. But the idea of being prepared for whatever kind of violence we experience because we understand that we are living in a hostile environment in the United States, I think that's just the way we have to play everything, whether it's an educational environment, a work environment, economic environment, even your own front yard. You can find yourself in a hostile environment at any time in America. If you are Black at the wrong time, in the wrong place, in the presence of the wrong crazy white person. Yeah. And if you are just aware that that's a possibility and you prepare for said possibilities, I think in the moment you can deal with them.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, we know that the situation could have escalated to something way, way worse. I don't know about you guys, but it definitely gave me Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman vibes. Same situation. Someone just walking in the neighborhood and someone approaching them that had no right to do so whatsoever on a public sidewalk. Leroy, what you got?
Yeah, I think we just have to be mindful of our surroundings and where we are, the context of what's happening and how that unfolds, and behave accordingly. I mean, I stay armed, and it doesn't matter if I'm in a white neighborhood, a predominant white neighborhood, a black or a mixed neighborhood. It doesn't matter. I mean, there are some places that I go that are predominantly black, and I'm careful on what I do and how I move. It's necessary. But then there are white neighborhoods and predominantly white neighborhoods where I go, and I am careful and mindful of how I move because I don't want to have that interaction. I mean, in the event that I have to respond, I would respond differently depending on where I am. I mean, if I was in a situation like that, it was my community, my neighborhood, it was predominantly white, and my neighbors didn't know who I was, and I felt threatened, and I felt like I was being violated. I would love to have a wonderful terroristic lawsuit. I would find something in the law books that I can pull out, because that's how you deal with that level of reaction with that type of environment. When you start to get legal and monetary things involved, you start to get their attention. You start to correct behaviors when you start to see that. But when you're in another neighborhood, that economics don't matter. It's about survival. It's about life or death. It's about opportunities and things like that. You just move a little bit differently. And I think we all have to be mindful where we are at all times and know what the customs are, and know what the traditions are, and know what to expect. When you go into the situation knowing what to expect, you can deal with what may unfold a little bit better if it happens to unfold.
I feel you. I agree with you. I like how you use the word survival there.
Absolutely. I mean, depending on where you are, it's a survival situation. Like you said before, you have to survive, and that is the case. But what is driving your mode of survival?
Hey,
did you prepare going in, or did you not prepare and just reacted out of fear to survive?
Let's get it. You got to survive to thrive. I got you. All right, let's move on. So, earlier when we first began talking, I talked about one of the things that I mentioned when I was talking about this wash, rinse, repeat cycle is the way the media spins things, right? People accuse the media of sensationalized incidents to anger people and to push certain narratives. Do you guys agree with that? Or do you think that the media does a good job of being unbiased and just sticking to the facts? Flex, what you got?
Man, I wasn't even paying attention. What you say, brother?
Ivo, what you got?
Thank you, man.
I do not believe the media sensationalizes things. I believe the media applies cultural slant to everything, and it's never in our favor. The cultural biases of journalists themselves and journalistic organizations come through in every headline. And more often than not, we're so conditioned to accept it, we don't even notice it. Like I remember, I think it was the Daily Mail or some physical newspaper, the day after DMX and Prince Charles died. They had them both on the cover. Prince Charles, beloved monarch, gone to glory, or whatever they said. And then DMX, an artist with a troubled history, but a beautiful gift, or something to that effect. They had to put in there that DMX was troubled. First of all, who's more troubled than a prince that stays up in the attic after he married his cousin and had some weird looking babies and some weird looking grandkids, and don't nobody even know if you're alive or not? Did Prince Harry, did he even really die that day? How will we know? But DMX is troubled. Yeah. Our headlines are always slanted toward negative character traits, negative aspects of our behavior or our culture, as if we are inherently deficient, and it is therefore some part of the explanation for what we're doing. Adversely, when white people do absolutely crazy, insane, low down criminal things, they're having a bad day, or a troubled childhood. They were bullied in school. Even though they graduated 4 years ago, the anger has been building the entire time. Because whiteness is supposed to be inherently good. So when they do evil things, there must be something wrong. Blackness is inherently bad. So when black people do criminal things, well, yeah, that's what black people do. That the news stories and the slant in which they are told, I always see that, but I don't think the headlines or the events themselves are sensationalized. Like they're legitimately sensational.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Or just to piggyback off what you're saying, referring to a troubled white kid. They're calling him a kid, but he's 22 years old, 23 years old. But 16, 17-year-old black man, blah, 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 blah.
It's a business. It's a business. They're always looking out for the bottom line. You can look at if a new movie is produced and it's ready to hit the theaters, they put together a really nice trailer that puts a lot of music and a lot of excitement, and it draws you in because they want to get you into that theater to pay that money so they can get the revenue from that. I see the media no different. It's a business. They're not here to serve the public. They're here to make sure that the bottom line is in their favor. They're here to make sure that their supporters pockets are filled with the money, and so they'll craft the narrative in a way that draws in viewers, and that feeds off of that mindset of the majority of Americans. 75% of the U.S. population are white Americans. So the viewership is going to be slanted towards the mindset of that particular demographic of individuals. And so, of course, to get them watching, to get them leaning into the televisions, they're going to use certain language, and they're going to manipulate words, and they're going to manipulate video, and they're going to manipulate the music to draw those eyeballs to those screens so they can continue to have that bottom line be in their favor. That's it.
I got you. Well, I mean, we can go on and on about this, but, unfortunately, we've run out of time. I definitely appreciate the audience coming through as always with the intellectual, prolific, thought-provoking points that they made. And I definitely want to thank our guests for coming on with us tonight. Ivo, what you got going on? What you want to plug? Let the audience know.
Okay, well, if you're on Clubhouse, I want you to check out Chill Workroom. It's a virtual co-working space. And me, Ivo Jackson, I'm a marketing consultant, and I am organizing small group marketing coaching on Clubhouse. We've got groups going, and it's very productive. Also, I'm a cannabis advocate. And if you're interested in learning more about how cannabis can help you balance your health and lifestyle, visit me on Instagram. I'm at Luxurious Edibles.
Hey, so later on after the show, can you put your information in the comments on how people can reach out to you on those?
Because sometimes people spell stuff different and unique. So, is it spelled regular?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Sure.
Leroy, what you got going?
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm excited about a partnership that I just locked down with an organization called Lunch Point Community Development Center that's here in the Houston area. And we have been making ways into Houston Independent School District to be in the class with students who are children of incarcerated parents. And so what we're doing is we're trying to help students work through the emotional traumas associated with having a caregiver or a parent incarcerated. And I think a lot of that gets to the root of the emotional traumas that sometimes play out when dealing with a person of authority, whether that's a teacher, whether it's a law enforcement officer, or whether it's the bus driver. Anyone in authority sometimes have a bad experience with those because of those traumas that are there. And so we're working to help deal with a lot of those traumas at the early age before they get to the point to where they're in those intense moments of interaction. And so I like to encourage everyone who's watching to go to lunchpointcdc.com and just check out the website. And if you have any type of concern and passion about what's happening there, we encourage you to make a small donation to allow us to continue the work that we've begun.
That's really dope. Please make sure that you type that into the comments as well so people can check it out. I don't want people going to lunch, like the lunch you eat. So we definitely want to make sure people go to the right thing. That's a really dope initiative.
Appreciate it.
I can definitely relate. Like being a kid that's been on the angel tree before myself.
Yes.
If you know, you know. But
That's
I
me.
can relate. All right, let's go ahead and wrap this thing up. I appreciate you guys being on the show tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
As honorary crew members, tradition that we have here at the Floor is Yours podcast is we have parting thoughts. So, ladies first, Ivo, what are your parting thoughts? Any type of inspirational, cool quotes, or anything you just want to let people know to end it off?
In the words of T.D. Jakes, get ready, get ready, get ready.
Is that what he said?
I love it.
Get ready, get ready, get ready. You know, that's his thing.
Yeah.
But prepare yourself for the reality that you're dealing with, whatever that may be.
Absolutely.
Okay. Leroy.
I just want to encourage everyone to let's find a way to take an offensive approach to whatever it is that we are passionate about in life. If it's justice that we want, let's not take a defensive approach, meaning we are waiting for something to happen and then respond to it. I think that approach only continues this or perpetuates this cycle that we've seen. How can we bring our minds together to go on the offense, to start making strides in whether it's justice or equality or women's rights or whatever it is? Let's start taking an offensive approach by educating ourselves about the stipulations that surround those things, that restrict those things, that restrain those things. Let's understand those things and find the weak points and put pressure there and not just be on the defensive responding to injustices or inequality.
Okay. Appreciate that. Flips, closing words. What you got?
Hey, just a big thank you to Ivo and Leroy for always showing up and bringing your A game. I appreciate you, and I hope we don't have a huge break into the next show. So we'll be better prepared next time to put the plug out there for your businesses, your organizations, or anything else that you're working on. But again, thank you for everything. Appreciate your passion for the community and what you're doing, and I really respect everything that you bring to the game.
Okay.
Appreciate it for having us on. Thank you.
My closing remarks are kind of piggybacking off what Ivo said, which is to get ready, because guess what? They're getting ready. You guys don't know, there was a portion of a new bill that was passed today. It's called the Constitutional Carry Bill. Basically a no license, no permit required thing, no training required or needed to open carry a firearm if it gets fully passed. Basically, it means that the Constitution is your permit to carry. And unfortunately, it's already like this in other states like Oklahoma, Arkansas, Mississippi, and now they're trying to bring it to Texas. So, like I said, they're getting ready, so we need to get ready. That's pretty much it. I appreciate you guys tuning in to another great show. Thank you once again. Like I said, the Floor is Yours podcast. It's the #1 rated podcast in America. It's award-winning. I'm not saying any of that's true. Like I said,
It is true.
Yeah, like I said, if we were on Yelp, I would give us a good review. Like I said, 5 out of 5 stars. Would recommend it. All right, that's it. Flex, drop that outro.
I got a little something different for y'all this time.
My white sisters and brothers, you're unguilty of the past. You're guilty if you remain silent and give today's racists a pass. They won't listen to me when I articulate my reason. Can you tell them Black Lives Matter? Oh, and say it like you mean it. 45, he'll sell out the entire human race if it fattens his pocket and energizes his base. He'll hurt them all in arenas so he can plead his case. He wants 4 more years in office so he can divide us all by race. Congress saved wealthy corporations with $1 trillion bailouts. I only say Candace Owens to remind you she's a sellout. She downs her own people, really it's a cop-out. She sides with her oppressors when other people speak out. See, it's okay if other blacks don't agree with me, but she agrees with the system that makes it okay to murder me. Sister Candace, if you're thinking that they won't murder you, remember Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor, yeah, they were murdered too. There are many like Candace Owens who give cover to the racist. Some on my friends list. I see their Facebook pages. American education is really miseducation, more like indoctrination of our entire civilization. Let's talk reparations. Check the situation. It wasn't the slave, it was the slave owners who received reparations. Now to those who fight for the cause, I thank you. For those who fight against the cause, you are evil. And to some who still vote for Trump, nah, I don't hate you. You got your own interests to consider. Really, I don't blame you. But if you're okay with how you mistreat people, really, aren't you just as evil? And if you believe Black Lives Matter, good for you. Don't forget to let Black Lives know that Black Lives Matter too.
All right, so y'all could tell by the topic that was a little old, but hey, I just thought it was appropriate. You know, anytime we're in the social unrest, that we remind each other what we're up against. So appreciate you guys' time.
Man, I love that.
Yeah, okay.
I love that, man.
Yeah, it's still dope.
That does not get old.
Ever.
It does not get old.
Yeah, appreciate y'all, man. Hey,
All right, we'll be back on Sunday with the regular crew. Same time, 7 p.m. Remember, friends don't let friends drink alone, and you shouldn't watch this show alone either. So, also make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just right now, we don't have a YouTube URL because we need y'all to subscribe so we can get that. So again, just Google search YouTube, the Floor is Yours podcast. It'll come right up. Click on the subscribe button. Also, we have links, and if you're on Facebook, you can click on the active links. Again, we appreciate y'all watching the show. Peace.